The dust-covered woman who collapsed at the edge of Wade Olson's cattle ranch in the Kansas Territory summer heat of 1867 clutched a water-stained photograph so tightly that he had to gently pry her fingers open to see what mattered more to her than consciousness itself. Wade had been mending fence posts along the southern boundary of his property when he spotted her stumbling figure against the horizon. At first, he thought it might be a mirage, the heat playing tricks on his eyes as it often did in late July. But when she fell forward onto her knees and stayed down, he kicked his horse into a gallop and reached her within moments. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark blonde hair that had come loose from its pins and now hung in tangled waves around her sunburned face. Her dress had once been a respectable traveling outfit, forest green with black trim, but now it was covered in trail dust and torn at the hem. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Wade dismounted and knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. It was there, steady but weak. He grabbed his canteen and carefully tilted her head back, letting a few drops of water fall onto her parched lips. She stirred slightly, a small moan escaping her throat. "Easy now," he said softly. "You are safe, I have got you." Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of amber in sunlight. They focused on him with difficulty, confusion clouding her features. "Please," she whispered. "Help me, I need to find him." "Find who?" Wade asked, offering her another small sip of water. But she had slipped back into unconsciousness, her body going limp in his arms. That was when he noticed the photograph still gripped in her hand. He carefully worked it free and studied the image. It showed a young man in his mid-20s, standing stiffly in front of a photographer's backdrop. The man had dark hair and a serious expression, and on the back someone had written in fading ink, "Thomas Price, departed for Leavenworth, May 1866. Wade glanced down at the woman in his arms, then back at the photograph. Leavenworth was the nearest town to his ranch, about 15 miles north. Whatever this woman's story was, whatever answers she sought, she had come a long way to find them, and she had nearly died in the process. He tucked the photograph into his vest pocket, then lifted her carefully and draped her across his saddle before mounting behind her. His fence mending would have to wait. Right now, getting this woman back to his ranch house and tending to her was the only thing that mattered. The ride back took nearly an hour, with Wade keeping his horse at a steady walk to avoid jostling his unconscious passenger too much. He kept one arm wrapped securely around her waist, holding her against his chest. She felt fragile in his arms, all sharp angles and delicate bones. How long had she been wandering the prairie without proper food or water? His ranch house came into view as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. It was a modest two-story structure built from local limestone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. He had built it himself 5 years ago when he first claimed this land, and while it was not fancy, it was solid and comfortable. The barn and outbuildings stood to the east, and beyond them stretched hundreds of acres of grazing land where his cattle roamed. Wade guided his horse right up to the porch steps and dismounted, then carefully lifted the woman down. She stirred again as he carried her up the steps and through the front door, her head rolling against his shoulder. "Where am I?" she mumbled. "My ranch," Wade replied, carrying her through the sitting room and up the narrow staircase to the second floor. "You are going to be all right. You just need rest and water and food." He took her to the guest bedroom, a small but tidy room with a brass bed frame and a patchwork quilt his mother had made before she passed. He laid the woman down gently and removed her dusty boots, then covered her with a light sheet. "I will get you some water," he said, though he was not sure if she could hear him. "Do not try to move." Wade hurried back downstairs to the kitchen and pumped fresh water into a pitcher, then grabbed a clean glass and a washcloth. When he returned to the bedroom, her eyes were open again, tracking his movements with more awareness than before. "Here," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed and helping her sit up enough to drink. "Slow sips, not too much at once." She obeyed, drinking carefully. After a few sips, she pulled back and looked at him properly for the first time. Wade felt something shift in his chest under that amber gaze. Even exhausted and disheveled, she was striking. "Thank you," she said, her voice still hoarse but stronger. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did," Wade said honestly. "How long were you walking?" 2 days, I think, maybe 3, I lost track." She closed her eyes briefly as if the memory pained her. "The stagecoach broke an axle about 30 miles south of here. The driver said he would fix it, but I could not wait. I had to keep going. I had to get to Leavenworth. 30 miles on foot in this heat." Wade shook his head in disbelief. "That is a good way to kill yourself, miss." "I had water at first," she said defensively, "but my canteen ran out yesterday and I could not find any creeks or springs. I knew I was taking a risk, but I had no choice." Wade wanted to argue that there was always a choice, that whatever brought her out here could not possibly be worth dying for, but he held his tongue. The desperation in her eyes told him that arguing would be pointless. Instead, he asked, "What is your name?" "Penelope," she said. "Penelope Price, and you are Wade Olson. This is my ranch." He pulled the photograph from his pocket and held it up. "This fell out of your hand, Thomas Price, a relative." Penelope's eyes widened and she reached for the photograph with trembling fingers. "My brother," she said softly. "My twin brother. Have you seen him? Do you know him?" Wade shook his head. "I am sorry, no, but Leavenworth is not a big town. Someone there might know where he is." "I hope so." Penelope clutched the photograph to her chest. "He left home over a year ago. He wrote to us at first, saying he had found work on a ranch near Leavenworth. But then the letters stopped coming. My parents were beside themselves with worry, so I volunteered to come and find him. To make sure he was all right." "You came all this way by yourself?" Wade asked, unable to hide his surprise. "From where?" "Ohio, Cincinnati." Penelope looked down at the photograph, her thumb tracing the outline of her brother's face. "It took me 3 weeks by train and stagecoach to get this far. And then the axle broke, and the driver said it would be days before he could fix it or send for help, and I just could not wait anymore. Every day that passes is another day my parents do not know if Thomas is alive or dead." Wade felt a surge of admiration for this woman's determination, even if it was reckless. She had crossed half the country alone to find her brother, and she had nearly died trying to cover the last 30 miles on foot. That took a kind of courage he rarely saw. "Well, you are not walking anywhere for the next few days," he said firmly. "You need to rest and recover your strength. Then I will take you into Leavenworth myself and help you look for your brother." Penelope's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly as if embarrassed by her own emotion. "I cannot ask you to do that. You have already done so much." "You are not asking. I am offering." Wade stood and moved toward the door. "Now I am going to make you something to eat. Nothing heavy, just some broth and bread. You need to get some food in you slowly or you will make yourself sick." "Wait," Penelope called out as he reached the doorway. He turned back to look at her. "Why are you helping me? You do not even know me." Wade considered the question for a moment. The honest answer was that he did not fully understand it himself. Yes, he would have helped anyone he found collapsed on his land. That was just basic human decency. But there was something more here, something about the way she looked at him with those amber eyes, the way she had been willing to risk everything for her family. It stirred something in him that had been dormant for a long time. "Because you need help," he said simply. And because I can give it. That is reason enough. He left before she could respond and headed back downstairs to the kitchen. As he stoked the fire in the cast iron stove and put on a pot of beef broth he had made a few days earlier, Wade found his thoughts drifting back to the woman upstairs, Penelope. Even her name was beautiful. He shook his head at himself. She was here to find her brother, nothing more. She would recover, they would go to Leavenworth, hopefully find Thomas Price alive and well, and then she would return to Ohio with her brother. That was how this story would go. Getting any other ideas would be foolish. Still, as he sliced bread and arranged it on a plate, Wade could not quite shake the feeling that his life had just changed in some fundamental way. That the moment he saw Penelope Price collapsed on his land, something had shifted. He just did not know what yet. Over the next 3 days, Wade tended to Penelope with a care and attention that surprised even himself. He brought her meals 3 times a day, starting with simple broths and gradually working up to more substantial fare. He fetched fresh water whenever she needed it and changed the sheets on her bed daily. He even rode into Leavenworth to buy her a new dress and some proper supplies, since her traveling clothes were beyond saving. Penelope protested his generosity at first, insisting she did not need so much attention and that she was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. But Wade insisted right back, pointing out that she had come closer to death than she seemed to realize, and that pushing herself too hard too fast would only set back her recovery. As the days passed, they fell into an easy rhythm. Wade would come upstairs after finishing his morning chores, and they would talk while Penelope ate breakfast. He told her about his ranch, about how he had come west from Minnesota after the war ended and claimed this land under the Homestead Act. She told him about growing up in Cincinnati, about her parents who ran a small dry goods store, about her twin brother who had always been restless and eager for adventure. "Thomas and I have always been close," Penelope said on the 3rd morning, sitting up in bed with her breakfast tray across her lap. She looked much better now, the color returning to her cheeks and the brightness returning to her eyes. "We used to say we could read each other's minds. When he stopped writing, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it." "Twin intuition?" Wade asked, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. "Something like that." Penelope took a bite of the eggs he had prepared, closing her eyes in appreciation. "These are delicious, by the way." "I did not know cowboys could cook." "I am a rancher, not a cowboy," Wade corrected with a slight smile. "And I learned to cook out of necessity. When you live alone, you either learn or you starve." "You live here all alone?" Penelope asked, looking around the neat bedroom with new understanding. "No wife. No family, just me and my ranch hands. I have 3 men who work for me, but they stay in the bunkhouse near the barn. I had a family once. My parents and my younger sister. But my mother died of fever when I was 16 and my father passed 2 years later. My sister Emma got married and moved to California with her husband." Wade did not mention that he too had almost gotten married once, to a girl back in Minnesota. But she had not wanted to come west with him, had not wanted the hard, uncertain life of a rancher's wife. So she had married someone else, someone safe and stable who worked at a bank. "This ranch is my family now." Penelope studied him thoughtfully. "That sounds lonely." "Sometimes it is," Wade admitted, "but it is also peaceful. And there is something satisfying about building something with your own hands, watching it grow and prosper. This land has given me purpose." "I can understand that," Penelope said softly. "Everyone needs purpose." That afternoon, Penelope insisted she was well enough to come downstairs. Wade helped her down the stairs, staying close in case she felt dizzy or weak. But she managed just fine, and soon she was settled in a comfortable chair in the sitting room, looking out the window at the prairie stretching endlessly in all directions. "It is so different from Ohio," she mused. "Everything is so open here, so wild." "Does it frighten you?" Wade asked, bringing her a cup of tea. "A little," she admitted. "But it is also beautiful in its own way. I can see why Thomas wanted to come west. There is a freedom here you do not find in the city." Wade sat down in the chair opposite hers, cradling his own cup of coffee. "Your brother, what was he like?" "Besides restless," Penelope smiled, her whole face lighting up. "He was kind, funny, always getting into some kind of trouble, but never anything truly bad. He used to bring home stray dogs when we were children, and my mother would throw up her hands and say we could not possibly keep another animal. But Thomas would give her those big brown eyes of his, and she would always give in." Her smile faded slightly. "He worked in our father's store after he finished school, but I could tell he was not happy. He wanted adventure, excitement. So when he said he was going west to find work, none of us were really surprised. We just did not expect him to stop writing." "People get busy," Wade offered, though he knew it sounded weak. "Especially during the busy seasons on a ranch. Maybe he just lost track of time." "For 6 months," Penelope shook her head. "No, something is wrong, I know it." Wade wanted to comfort her, to promise that they would find her brother safe and sound. But he had lived in Kansas long enough to know that the frontier could be dangerous. Men disappeared all the time, claimed by accidents or sickness or violence. Still, he kept these dark thoughts to himself. "We will go to Leavenworth tomorrow," he said instead. "You are strong enough now, and the sooner we start looking, the better." Penelope's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Wade. I do not know how I will ever repay you for your kindness." "I do not want repayment," Wade said firmly. "I just want to help you find your brother." They rode into Leavenworth early the next morning, taking Wade's sturdy buckboard wagon since it was more comfortable than riding horseback. Penelope wore the new dress Wade had bought for her, a simple but pretty calico print in shades of blue that brought out the gold in her eyes. She had pinned her hair up neatly and looked every inch the respectable young lady from back east. Leavenworth was a bustling town, one of the oldest settlements in the Kansas Territory. The main street was lined with businesses: dry goods stores, saloons, a hotel, a bank, a church, a newspaper office. Soldiers from nearby Fort Leavenworth mingled with settlers, ranchers, and travelers. The town hummed with activity and possibility. Wade guided the wagon to a stop outside the general store and helped Penelope down. "We should start by asking around. Someone might remember your brother or know which ranch he worked for." They spent the next several hours going from business to business, showing Thomas's photograph to anyone who would look. Most people shook their heads apologetically, saying they did not recognize him. A few thought he looked vaguely familiar, but could not say where they had seen him. By mid-afternoon, Penelope was beginning to look discouraged. "We will find him," Wade said gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Leavenworth might be bigger than I said. We just need to keep looking." They tried the land office next, thinking perhaps Thomas had filed a claim or purchased property. But the clerk said he had no record of a Thomas Price. Then they went to the newspaper office, where the editor said he could put a notice in the next edition asking anyone who knew Thomas to come forward. "That is a good idea," Wade said, "though it means we will have to wait a few days for the paper to print and circulate." "I do not mind waiting," Penelope said. "Not if it means finding Thomas." As they left the newspaper office, a grizzled old man sitting on a bench outside called out to them. "Did I hear you asking about Thomas Price?" Penelope whirled around, hope blazing in her eyes. "Yes. Do you know him?" The old man squinted at the photograph Penelope thrust in front of him, then nodded slowly. "Yep, that is him. Nice young fella. Worked for the Hendersons on their ranch west of here. I used to see him in town buying supplies." "Used to?" Wade asked, his instincts prickling. "You do not see him anymore." The old man shook his head. "The Hendersons sold their ranch about 4 months back and moved to Colorado, not sure what happened to the people who worked for them." Penelope's face fell. "Do you know where I can find the Hendersons? An address in Colorado?" "Sorry, miss. I just knew them to nod to. But you might try asking at the land office. They would have a record of the sale and maybe a forwarding address." They thanked the old man and hurried back to the land office. The clerk confirmed that yes, the Henderson ranch had been sold to a family named Morrison. The Morrisons had kept some of the ranch hands-on, but others had been let go. He did not have a forwarding address for the Hendersons, but he suggested they ride out to the Morrison ranch and ask if anyone there knew what had happened to Thomas. By the time they finished at the land office, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. Wade glanced at Penelope, noting the exhaustion in her face despite her determination. "It is too late to ride out to the Morrison place today. We should get a room at the hotel and head out first thing tomorrow morning." Penelope looked like she wanted to argue, but then she nodded. "You are right. I am tired, and we do not want to show up at someone's ranch in the dark." Wade secured 2 rooms at the hotel, proper and respectable. They had dinner together in the hotel restaurant, a simple meal of steak and potatoes that nonetheless felt special somehow. Sitting across from Penelope in the lamplight, watching the way her face animated when she talked, Wade found himself wishing this evening did not have to end. "What will you do when you find your brother?" he asked, not really wanting to hear the answer but needing to know anyway. "I suppose we will go home," Penelope said, though she did not sound entirely certain. "My parents will be so relieved to see Thomas, and I need to get back to helping them with the store." "Is that what you want?" Wade asked. "To work in a store in Cincinnati?" Penelope was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I never really thought about what I wanted," she admitted. "I always just did what was expected. Help my parents find a suitable husband, raise a family. But coming out here, seeing all this open space and possibility, it makes me wonder what else might be out there for me." Wade's heart beat faster. The West has a way of changing people, making them see new possibilities. Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. Wade felt it like electricity in the air before a storm, that sense of inevitability and rightness. But he pushed the feeling down. Penelope was here for her brother, and he was helping her as any decent person would. That was all. Still, as they said goodnight and went to their separate rooms, Wade lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about amber eyes and quiet courage, and the way Penelope's smile made his whole world feel brighter. The Morrison Ranch was about an hour's ride west of Leavenworth, nestled in a valley with good water and grazing land. Wade and Penelope arrived mid-morning to find the place bustling with activity. Cowboys were working horses in the corral, and the sound of hammering came from the barn where someone was making repairs. A middle-aged woman came out of the house as Wade brought the wagon to a stop. She wiped her hands on her apron and smiled pleasantly. "Can I help you folks, Mrs. Morrison?" Wade asked, and when the woman nodded, he continued. "My name is Wade Olson, and this is Miss Penelope Price. We are looking for her brother, Thomas Price. We heard he used to work for the Hendersons who owned this place before you." Mrs. Morrison's friendly expression faltered. "Thomas Price. Oh dear, you had better come inside." Wade and Penelope exchanged worried glances as they followed Mrs. Morrison into the house. She led them to the kitchen and gestured for them to sit at the table, then poured them each a cup of coffee with shaking hands. "I am sorry to have to tell you this, Mrs. Morrison said, sitting down heavily. "But Thomas was badly hurt in an accident about 5 months ago. A horse threw him and he hit his head on a rock. Doc said it was a miracle he survived at all." Penelope gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Is he alive?" "Where is he?" "He is alive," Mrs. Morrison said quickly. "But he has been recovering real slow. The Hendersons sold the ranch right after the accident, said they could not handle the stress of it all. They left Thomas in the care of Doc Matthews in town. I have been checking on him regular, bringing him food and making sure he has what he needs. But he has not been well enough to write letters or anything like that." "Can I see him?" Penelope asked urgently. "Please, I need to see my brother." "Of course, dear." Mrs. Morrison patted Penelope's hand sympathetically. "Doc Matthews has a place above his office where he keeps patients who need long-term care. I will take you there right now if you like." The ride back to Leavenworth felt both endless and too short. Wade kept glancing at Penelope, who sat rigid beside him, her hands clenched in her lap. He wanted to comfort her, but what could he say? Her brother was alive but badly hurt. The news could have been worse, but it was not good. Doc Matthews was a kindly man in his 50s with graying hair and gentle hands. He led them upstairs to a small but clean room where Thomas Price lay in a narrow bed, propped up on pillows. He looked thinner than in his photograph, and there was a jagged scar on his temple, but he was alive and awake. "Thomas!" Penelope cried, rushing to his bedside. She grabbed his hand and pressed it to her cheek, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Thomas, I was so worried about you." Thomas looked confused at first, blinking slowly as if trying to place her face. Then recognition dawned and his own eyes filled with tears. "Penny, is it really you? But how did you get here?" "I came to find you when you stopped writing," Penelope said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Mother and father were worried sick. We all were. Why did you not tell us you were hurt?" "I could not," Thomas said, his voice weak but steady. "After the accident, I could not remember anything for weeks. Not my name, not where I came from, nothing. Doc Matthews said it was the blow to my head. My memory came back slowly, but by then so much time had passed, and I was still too weak to travel or even write a proper letter. I kept thinking I would get better soon, and then I would write to explain everything. But soon turned into months." Doc Matthews stepped forward. "Your brother is healing well, but head injuries are tricky things. He's going to need more time before he can travel any distance. At least another month, maybe 2. Penelope looked stricken. "I cannot leave him here alone for that long, but I need to let our parents know he is alive and safe. They will be beside themselves with worry." "You could telegraph them," Wade suggested. "The telegraph office in town can send a message to Cincinnati. It will not be as good as a letter, but at least they will know Thomas is all right." "That is a wonderful idea," Penelope said gratefully. She turned back to her brother, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "I am staying here with you until you are well enough to travel home." Thomas shook his head weakly. "Penny, that could be months. You cannot put your life on hold for that long." "You are my brother," Penelope said firmly. "Of course I can." Doc Matthews cleared his throat. "Miss Price, I do not have room for another long-term patient here. Thomas takes up my only spare room." Penelope's face fell as she realized the problem. She could stay in town at the hotel, but that would be expensive, and her funds were limited. She had only brought enough money for the journey, assuming she would find Thomas quickly and they would return home together. "She can stay at my ranch," Wade heard himself say. The words were out before he could think them through, but once spoken, he knew they were right. "I have plenty of room, and it is close enough that she can visit her brother as often as she wants. No charge, just common hospitality." Penelope turned to look at him, her amber eyes wide. "Wade, I cannot impose on you any more than I already have. You have done so much for me already." "It is not an imposition if I am offering freely," Wade said. "Besides, what else are you going to do? You said yourself you cannot leave your brother, but you also cannot afford to stay at the hotel for months. My offer is the practical solution." Thomas studied Wade with sharp intelligence despite his weakened state. "You are being very generous to my sister, Mr. Olson. May I ask why?" It was a fair question, and Wade knew Thomas was really asking about his intentions. "Because she came all this way to find you, nearly died trying, and now she needs help. And because helping people who need it is what decent folks do." He met Thomas's gaze steadily. "Your sister is safe with me." "You have my word on that." Something in Thomas's expression softened. "I believe you, and I appreciate you looking after Penny. She is stubborn as a mule and twice as independent, but she has a good heart." "I noticed," Wade said, glancing at Penelope with a small smile. They spent another hour visiting with Thomas, with Penelope filling him in on news from home, and Thomas explaining more about his accident and recovery. By the time they left to send the telegram to Ohio, Thomas was looking tired but happy, and Penelope seemed lighter than she had since Wade first found her. At the telegraph office, Penelope composed a careful message to her parents. "Found Thomas in Leavenworth. Recovering from injury but will be well. Staying until he can travel. Do not worry. Love, Penelope." "That should ease their minds," Wade said as they left the telegraph office. "At least they will know you both are all right." "Yes," Penelope agreed. "Though my mother is going to have a fit when she realizes I am staying in Kansas for weeks, possibly months." She looked up at Wade with an expression he could not quite read. "Are you sure about me staying at your ranch? It is a lot to ask." "You did not ask, I offered." Wade took her elbow gently, guiding her back toward where he had left the wagon. "Besides, I will appreciate the company. Like I said before, it gets lonely out there sometimes." As they rode back to the ranch in the afternoon sunlight, Wade found himself thinking about what the next few weeks and months might look like with Penelope staying in his house. It would be proper, of course. She would keep her room upstairs, and he would be a perfect gentleman. But still, the thought of seeing her every day, sharing meals with her, talking with her in the evenings, it filled him with a warmth he had not felt in years, maybe longer than years, maybe ever. The next several weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Wade would rise early and do his ranch work, tending to the cattle, mending fences, overseeing his ranch hands. Penelope would help around the house, cooking meals and tidying up, though Wade insisted she was a guest and did not need to work. She insisted right back that she could not just sit idle all day, that she needed to be useful. "At home, I am always busy with the store or the house," she explained one morning as she kneaded bread dough at the kitchen table. "I do not know how to just sit around doing nothing." "Fair enough," Wade said, watching her capable hands work the dough. "But you are still recovering yourself, you know. Do not overdo it." "Says the man who works from dawn until dusk every day," Penelope teased. "That is different. I am used to it. And I will get used to it too." 3 times a week, Wade would drive Penelope into Leavenworth to visit Thomas. They would spend a few hours with him, and each visit showed marked improvement. Thomas was gaining weight, his color was better, and he could sit up and walk around the room for short periods. Doc Matthews was pleased with his progress, and said he might be able to travel in another month if he continued improving at this rate. On the drives back and forth to town, Wade and Penelope talked about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Cincinnati, about the books she loved to read, about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday. He told her about building his ranch from nothing, about the satisfaction of watching his herd grow year by year, about the beauty of the prairie in winter when everything was covered in snow. "You ever get scared?" Penelope asked one afternoon as they drove through the endless grasslands. "Being out here so far from everything, sometimes," Wade admitted. "Especially during bad storms or when cattle get sick. But the fear is part of it, I think. You learn to live with it and push through it. That is what makes you stronger." "You are very brave," Penelope said softly. Wade laughed, though it felt strangely bashful. "I am not brave, I am just stubborn. There is a difference." "I do not think so. I think you are one of the bravest people I have ever met." The sincerity in her voice made Wade's chest tighten. He glanced over at her, at the way the afternoon sun turned her hair to gold, at the soft curve of her cheek and the determined set of her jaw. Beautiful, he thought. Inside and out. As the weeks passed, Wade found it increasingly difficult to ignore the feelings growing in his chest. He looked forward to seeing Penelope every morning, to hearing her humming as she worked in the kitchen, to watching her face light up when she talked about something that excited her. He loved the sound of her laugh, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking hard about something, the gentle way she spoke to the horses when she thought no one was listening. He was falling in love with her. Maybe it had been from the moment he found her collapsed on his land. And that realization terrified him, because Penelope was only here temporarily. Once Thomas was well enough, they would return to Ohio together, back to their parents and their store and their lives in Cincinnati. Wade would stay here on his ranch, alone again except for his cattle and his land and his memories. The thought of her leaving felt like losing a limb. One evening in late August, after they had returned from visiting Thomas, Penelope helped Wade with the evening chores. She had insisted on learning how to milk the cow and feed the chickens, saying she wanted to be useful. Now she scattered feed for the hens while Wade finished brushing down the horses. "Thomas looks so much better," Penelope said, a smile in her voice. "Doc Matthews says he might be ready to travel in 2 weeks. Wade's hand stilled on the horse's flank. 2 weeks. "That is good news," he managed to say. "Your parents will be happy to have you both home." "Yes," Penelope said, but there was something odd in her tone. When Wade turned to look at her, she was staring at the ground, her expression troubled. "What is wrong?" he asked, setting down the brush and walking over to her. Penelope looked up at him, and her eyes were filled with confusion and something that looked like longing. "Wade, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "All right," he said carefully. "These past weeks, being here with you, it has been the happiest I have been in a long time, maybe ever. And I hope, that maybe you feel something too. Something more than just being a good host." She took a shaky breath. "Am I wrong? Is this all just one-sided?" Wade's heart hammered in his chest. He had been so careful not to let his feelings show, not to make her uncomfortable or burden her with emotions she did not share. But now she was asking directly, and he could not lie to her. "You are not wrong," he said quietly. "I do feel something. Have felt it almost from the beginning, if I am being honest." "Then why did you not say anything?" Penelope asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Because you are going back to Ohio," Wade said simply. "Because this is temporary for you, and I did not want to make things complicated or difficult. You came here to find your brother, not to start a romance with some rancher you barely know." "But I do know you," Penelope insisted, stepping closer to him. "These past weeks, I have gotten to know you better than I have known most people my whole life. I know you are kind and generous and hardworking. I know you take care of the things and people you love. I know you are gentle with animals and patient with difficult situations. I know the sound of your laugh and the way you furrow your brow when you are concentrating on something. And I know that, when I think about leaving, about going back to Cincinnati, my heart feels like it is breaking." Wade stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Penelope, what are you saying? I am saying I do not want to go back to Ohio, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I want to stay here with you if you will have me. Wade's world tilted. Everything he had been feeling, had been trying to suppress, came flooding to the surface. He reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. If I will have you, he repeated incredulously. Penelope, I have been half in love with you since the day I found you. These past weeks with you here have been the best of my life. The thought of you leaving has been killing me, but I could not ask you to stay. Could not ask you to give up your family and your home for a man you barely know and a hard life on a Kansas ranch. You are not asking, Penelope said, echoing his own words from weeks ago. I am offering. And yes, I barely know you in some ways, but in the ways that matter, I know everything I need to know. I know my heart, and my heart wants to stay with you. Wade pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her and holding her tight. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her arms around his waist. He breathed in the scent of her hair and felt something in his chest unlock. I love you, he said into her hair. I know it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Penelope Price. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, her face radiant. I love you too, Wade Olson. I think I have since you saved my life. You became the answer to prayers I did not even know I was praying. Wade lowered his head and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Penelope kissed him back, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing pouring out from both of them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Stay here and be my wife and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Yes, Penelope said without hesitation. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They stood there in the barn, holding each other as the evening deepened around them, both of them smiling like fools and neither of them caring one bit. The next morning, Wade and Penelope rode into Leavenworth together to tell Thomas the news. Wade was nervous about how her brother would react. Would Thomas think Wade had taken advantage of his sister? Would he be angry that Penelope was planning to stay in Kansas instead of returning home with him? But Thomas surprised him. When Penelope announced that she and Wade were engaged, Thomas studied Wade for a long moment, then broke into a wide grin. I thought something was going on between you two, Thomas said. Penny has not stopped talking about you since the first time we visited. Wade this and Wade that. It was pretty obvious, Penelope blushed. I did not talk about him that much. Yes, you did, Thomas said, laughing. Then he turned serious, looking at Wade directly. You will take good care of my sister with my life, Wade promised. And you will be good to her, make her happy. Every day for the rest of my life. Thomas nodded, satisfied. Then you have my blessing, though you should probably ask our father too when you write to him. I will, Wade said. I want to do this properly. What about you? Penelope asked Thomas. Will you be all right going back to Ohio without me? I will be fine, Thomas assured her. Doc says I am well enough now to write letters properly, so I have already written to Mother and Father explaining what happened and that I will be home soon. I will explain about you and Wade when I see them. They will understand. They want you to be happy, Penny. I hope so, Penelope said softly. I hate the thought of disappointing them. You could never disappoint them, Thomas said firmly. You are the best daughter they could ask for. And from what you have told me about Wade's ranch, it sounds like a good life. Hard work, sure, but honest and rewarding. That is more than a lot of people get. Wade felt a surge of gratitude toward Thomas. Having her brother's approval meant everything to Penelope. He could see it in her face. And having Thomas's blessing eased something in Wade's own mind too. He was not stealing Penelope away from her family. He was becoming part of that family. They spent the rest of the visit making plans. Thomas would stay with Doc Matthews for another week. Then he would take the stagecoach back to Cincinnati. Penelope would write a long letter to her parents explaining everything and send it with Thomas. Wade and Penelope would marry as soon as possible, maybe even before Thomas left so he could be there for the ceremony. "A week is not much time to plan a wedding," Penelope said as they drove back to the ranch. "We do not need anything fancy," Wade said. "Just you and me and a preacher and a few witnesses. That is all that matters." "I would like it if your ranch hands could be there," Penelope said. "They have been so kind to me these past weeks." "They will be honored," Wade said. The three men who worked for him had indeed taken to Penelope immediately. She had won them over by learning all their names, asking about their lives, and occasionally bringing them fresh baked goods. "Jake keeps asking me when I am going to make an honest woman of you." Penelope laughed. "He did not say that." "He absolutely did," Wade said with a grin. "In those exact words." They decided to marry the following Saturday, giving them 4 days to prepare. The preacher in Leavenworth agreed to perform the ceremony at the church. Mrs. Morrison offered to help Penelope alter one of her own nicer dresses for the occasion, since there was no time to have a proper wedding dress made. Thomas was declared well enough by Doc Matthews to attend the ceremony, as long as he did not overexert himself. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity and excitement. Wade spent extra time making sure the ranch house was as nice as possible for his new bride. He fixed the squeaky step on the stairs, repaired a shutter that had been loose for months, and even bought new curtains for the bedroom he and Penelope would share. His ranch hands teased him mercilessly about his sudden attention to domestic details, but he did not care. Penelope worked with Mrs. Morrison on the dress, a beautiful deep green silk that brought out the color of her eyes. She also wrote a long, heartfelt letter to her parents, explaining how she had met Wade, how he had saved her life, and how she had fallen in love with him. She tried to convey everything she felt, all the joy and certainty and hope for the future. She promised to visit them in Ohio someday soon and invited them to come to Kansas whenever they could. "They will understand," Wade assured her when he found her crying over the letter. "They might be surprised and maybe a little sad that you are not coming home, but they will understand. You are a grown woman making your own choice." "I hope you are right," Penelope said, wiping her eyes. "I just wish they could be here for the wedding. It does not feel right getting married without them." "Then we will have another ceremony when we visit them," Wade suggested. "A small one in their church back home so they can be part of it." "Would that help?" Penelope threw her arms around him. "You are the most wonderful man I have ever known." "Yes, that would help immensely." Saturday arrived bright and clear, with a perfect blue sky and a gentle breeze that kept the late August heat from being oppressive. Wade dressed in his best suit, a dark gray wool that he had not worn since he bought it 2 years ago. He brushed his hair back carefully and even trimmed his beard. Looking at himself in the mirror, he hardly recognized the nervous, excited man staring back at him. "You clean up pretty well, boss," Jake said, appearing in the doorway of Wade's bedroom. The lanky cowboy was grinning widely. "Miss Penelope is a lucky lady." "I am the lucky one," Wade said honestly. "I still cannot quite believe this is happening." "Believe it," Jake said. "I have never seen two people more suited for each other. You two belong together, anyone can see that." They rode into Leavenworth together, Wade and his 3 ranch hands in the wagon. Mrs. Morrison had taken Penelope to town earlier that morning to help her get ready at the hotel. The plan was for everyone to meet at the church at 2 in the afternoon. When Wade arrived at the church, his heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He stood at the front with the preacher, a kind older man named Reverend Thompson, and waited. Jake and the other two ranch hands, Charlie and Ben, sat in the front pew, all of them scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday best. The church door opened, and Wade's breath caught in his throat. Penelope stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun, looking more beautiful than he had ever seen her. The green dress fit her perfectly, highlighting her slender figure. Her hair was pinned up with small white flowers woven through it, and she carried a simple bouquet of wildflowers that Mrs. Morrison must have gathered. Thomas walked beside her, his arm linked through hers. He still looked a bit thin and pale, but he was steady on his feet and smiling proudly. Behind them came Mrs. Morrison and Doc Matthews, who had both agreed to serve as witnesses. Penelope walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes locked on Wade's. The love and trust in her gaze made his eyes sting with tears. When she reached him, Thomas placed her hand in Wade's and stepped back. "Take care of her," Thomas said quietly, just for Wade to hear. "Always," Wade promised. The ceremony was simple but perfect. Reverend Thompson spoke about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. Wade and Penelope exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as they both lived. When it came time for the rings, Wade pulled out the simple gold band he had purchased from the jeweler in town. It had taken a good portion of his savings, but he had not hesitated. He slipped it onto Penelope's finger, his hand shaking slightly with emotion. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his voice rough. Penelope had surprised him by getting a ring for him too, a plain gold band that matched hers. She slid it onto his finger with tears streaming down her face. "With this ring I thee wed," she repeated. "By the power vested in me by the Kansas Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson said with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride." Wade pulled Penelope close and kissed her deeply, not caring who was watching. She was his wife now. His wife. The word felt miraculous. Their small group of friends applauded and cheered. Mrs. Morrison wiped tears from her own eyes, and even tough old Doc Matthews looked misty. Thomas clapped Wade on the shoulder, grinning broadly. "Welcome to the family," Thomas said. "You are stuck with us now." "I can think of worse fates," Wade said, pulling Penelope against his side and holding her tight. They had a small celebration afterward at the hotel restaurant, with a nice meal, and even a cake that Mrs. Morrison had baked specially. Everyone toasted the happy couple and shared stories and laughter. As the evening wore on, Wade found himself watching Penelope, marveling at the fact that she was his wife now. She caught him staring and smiled, a warm, private smile that was just for him. Later, as the sun began to set, Wade and Penelope rode back to the ranch together in the wagon. Penelope sat close beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke much, content just to be together in the peaceful evening. When they reached the ranch, Wade helped Penelope down from the wagon and then, without warning, swept her up into his arms. "Wade." She squealed, laughing. "What are you doing, carrying my bride over the threshold?" he said, grinning as he carried her up the porch steps and through the front door. "It is tradition." He carried her all the way upstairs to their bedroom and gently set her down. The room glowed softly in the light from the lamp he had left burning earlier. He had changed the sheets that morning and put fresh flowers in a vase by the window. Everything was ready. Penelope looked around the room, taking in all the little touches, and her eyes filled with tears again. "You did all this for me. I wanted it to be special," Wade said, suddenly feeling shy. "I wanted everything to be perfect for you. It is perfect, Penelope said softly, turning to face him. "You are perfect." She reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with a passion that made his head spin. Wade wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, pouring all his love and devotion into the kiss. This was his wife, his partner, his future. She had wandered into his life looking for answers, and somehow, miraculously, he had become the answer to prayers he had not even known he was praying himself. They made love that night with tenderness and passion, discovering each other in the soft lamplight. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Penelope's head resting on Wade's chest as he stroked her hair. "I love you, Penelope Olson," Wade said softly. Even her name sounded right with his last name attached. "I love you too," Penelope murmured sleepily. "So much." As Wade held his wife and listened to her breathing slow into sleep, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For the moment he had found her collapsed on his land. For every conversation and shared meal and quiet moment that had led them here. For the courage she had shown in choosing to stay with him, to build a new life far from everything she had known. He would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted that choice. The next morning, Thomas left for Ohio on the eastbound stagecoach. It was a bittersweet farewell. Penelope clung to her brother, making him promise to write often and to tell their parents she loved them and missed them already. "I will tell them everything," Thomas promised. "And I will make them understand how happy you are. They will be glad for you, Penny. I know they will." "Thank you," Penelope said, wiping her eyes, "for understanding, for approving, for being the best brother I could ask for." "You would have done the same for me," Thomas said simply. He shook Wade's hand firmly. "Take care of my sister." "You have my word," Wade said. They watched the stagecoach pull away, carrying Thomas back toward the life they had all known before. But instead of sadness, Wade felt only anticipation for the future, for the life he and Penelope would build together. The months that followed were busy and joyful. Penelope threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning everything she could about running a household in the Kansas territory. She planted a garden and tended chickens, and learned to churn butter and preserve vegetables for winter. She befriended the ranch hands' wives when they came to visit, and became part of the small but close-knit community of ranchers and farmers in the area. Wade taught her to ride properly, giving her a gentle mare named Daisy. On Sunday afternoons, when the work was done, they would ride out together across the prairie, exploring the land that was now theirs. Penelope fell in love with the wildness and beauty of Kansas, with the endless sky and the way the grass turned gold in the autumn light. Letters came regularly from Ohio. Thomas had made it home safely and had explained everything to their parents. Their father had written a kind letter to Wade, welcoming him to the family and blessing the marriage. Their mother had written to Penelope, expressing surprise and a bit of sadness, but ultimately supporting her daughter's choice. She made Penelope promise to visit as soon as she could and asked for detailed letters about her new life. Penelope wrote faithfully every week, filling page after page with stories about the ranch, about Wade, about her growing love for this wild, beautiful place. And with each letter, Wade could see her parents' initial reservations melting away, replaced by happiness for their daughter. Winter came, bringing snow and bitter cold. Wade had worried that Penelope might find her first Kansas winter too harsh, but she proved as tough as any rancher's wife. She kept the house warm and comfortable, cooked hearty meals that sustained them through the coldest days, and even helped Wade when blizzards threatened the cattle. "You are full of surprises," Wade told her one evening as they sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets. Outside, wind howled and snow fell steadily, but inside they were warm and safe. "How so?" Penelope asked, snuggling closer to him. "I thought you might hate the winter out here, but you seem to thrive on it." "I love it," Penelope said honestly. "All of it. The snow and the cold and even the hard work. I love feeling like I am building something, contributing something. Back in Ohio, I always felt like I was just going through the motions, doing what was expected. But here, I feel alive. I feel like I matter." "You do matter," Wade said fiercely, tilting her face up to look at him. "You matter more than anything else in the world." Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, the garden sprouted, and Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She told Wade one morning in early April as they worked together in the garden, planting seeds for summer vegetables. "I have been feeling strange for a few weeks," she said, her hands stilling in the dirt. "Tired and queasy in the mornings. And I realized yesterday that I have missed my monthly courses twice now. Wade, I think I am going to have a baby." Wade felt like all the air had left his lungs. A baby. Their baby. He grabbed Penelope and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Are you sure? Are you all right? Do you need Doc Matthews to confirm it?" "I am sure," Penelope said, laughing at his excitement. "And yes, we should probably have Doc Matthews confirm it, but Wade, I am sure. I can feel it." Doc Matthews did confirm it a week later, declaring Penelope to be about 2 months along and in good health. He advised rest and good nutrition, and told Wade to make sure she did not overwork herself. "I am going to be a father," Wade kept saying as they drove back to the ranch, a note of wonder in his voice each time. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes, we are," Penelope said, smiling at his continued amazement. "In about 7 months, if Doc's calculations are right. Are you happy about it?" "Happy." Wade pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road and pulled Penelope into his arms. "I am beyond happy. I did not think I could love you more than I already did, but knowing you are carrying our child, it is like my heart has grown twice its size." "I feel the same," Penelope whispered against his chest. "Scared, but so happy." They wrote to both their families with the news. Thomas responded with a cheerful letter full of congratulations and jokes about being an uncle. Penelope's parents wrote back immediately, her mother's letter full of advice and her father's expressing his pride and joy at the prospect of a grandchild. His mother even mentioned planning a trip to Kansas to be there when the baby was born, if Penelope wanted her. "Of course I want her," Penelope said, tears streaming down her face as she read the letter. Pregnancy had made her emotions even more volatile than usual. "I would love to have my mother here." So it was arranged. Penelope's mother would come to Kansas in October, a month before the baby was due, and stay for several weeks to help with the birth and the first days of caring for a newborn. As Penelope's belly grew through the summer months, Wade found himself constantly marveling at the miracle of it all. This woman who had stumbled into his life less than a year ago, who he had saved and nursed back to health, was now his wife and the mother of his child. Sometimes it felt like a dream, but it was real, more real than anything he had ever known. Penelope bloomed through her pregnancy, growing rounder and more radiant with each passing week. She continued to work around the ranch, though Wade tried to limit her activities as she got bigger. She laughed at his protectiveness, but also found it endearing. "I am not made of glass," she would say when he tried to stop her from carrying water or hanging laundry. "Women have babies all the time. I will be fine." "I know," Wade would reply, "but indulge me anyway. I want to take care of you." Penelope's mother, Martha Price, arrived in mid-October, bringing with her an energy and warmth that immediately filled the house. She embraced Wade like a son, thanking him for making her daughter so happy. She also brought gifts, baby clothes she had sewn, blankets she had knitted, and a cradle that had been in their family for generations. This cradle held Penelope and Thomas when they were babies, Martha explained as Wade carried it up to the bedroom, and their father before them. I wanted to hold my grandchild too, Penelope cried when she saw it, hormones and sentiment overwhelming her. Martha held her daughter and stroked her hair, murmuring comfort. Wade watched them together and felt grateful that Penelope had her mother here for this momentous time. The baby came on a cold November night, 2 weeks before the expected due date. Penelope woke Wade in the middle of the night, her face pale but determined. "The baby is coming," she said simply. "My water broke and the pains are getting stronger." Wade bolted out of bed and went to wake Martha, who had been sleeping in the guest room. Martha took charge immediately, sending Wade to heat water and fetch clean towels while she helped Penelope through the early stages of labor. Jake rode into town through the dark to fetch Doc Matthews, and by the time the doctor arrived an hour later, Penelope's labor was progressing quickly. Wade wanted to be with her, to hold her hand and comfort her, but Martha and Doc Matthews both agreed it was better if he waited downstairs. So Wade paced the sitting room, his ranch hands keeping him company and offering awkward but well-meaning support. The sounds of Penelope's labor drifted down from above, each cry of pain making Wade's heart clench. He had never felt so helpless in his life. "She will be all right," Jake said, handing Wade a cup of coffee he probably did not need given how agitated he already was. "Miss Penelope is strong. She can handle this." Wade nodded but continued pacing. Hours passed, feeling like days. The sun rose, casting golden light through the windows. Still the labor continued. Finally, just after noon, a new sound pierced the air, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Wade's head snapped up, his heart racing. Martha appeared at the top of the stairs, beaming. "Come meet your son," she called down to Wade. "A son." Wade took the stairs 2 at a time and rushed into the bedroom. Penelope lay propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in one of the blankets Martha had brought, was a tiny red-faced baby with a shock of dark hair. "Wade," Penelope said softly, tears streaming down her face. "Come meet our son." Wade approached slowly, almost reverently. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby in awe. The infant had stopped crying and was now looking around with unfocused eyes, one tiny fist waving in the air. "He is perfect," Wade whispered. "You are both perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Penelope asked. Wade nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Penelope carefully transferred the baby into his arms, and Wade cradled his son against his chest. The baby was so small, so fragile, yet his grip was surprisingly strong when his tiny fingers wrapped around one of Wade's. "Hello, little one," Wade said softly. "I am your father. And I promise I will always protect you and love you and do everything I can to make you happy." The baby made a small sound, almost like he was responding, and Wade felt his heart overflow with love so intense it was almost painful. "What should we name him?" Penelope asked, watching the two of them with soft eyes. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking down at his son, Wade knew exactly what felt right. "Matthew," he said. "After your middle name, Martha, to honor your mother." "Matthew Thomas Olson, after both his grandmother's and his uncle. If that is all right with you." "Matthew Thomas Olson," Penelope repeated, smiling. "It is perfect. Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the world." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a newborn. But they were also filled with moments of pure joy. Matthew's first smile, the way he would grip their fingers so tightly, the small cooing sounds he made when content. Martha stayed for a month, helping with the baby and teaching Penelope everything she knew about caring for an infant. When it was finally time for her to return to Ohio, the farewell was tearful. "You have built a beautiful life here," Martha told Wade, hugging him tightly. "Thank you for loving my daughter so well." "Thank you for raising such an amazing woman," Wade replied. "You are welcome here anytime. This is your home too, whenever you want to visit." "I will hold you to that," Martha said with a smile. "I want to watch my grandson grow up, even if it means traveling halfway across the country to do it." That first winter with Matthew was challenging but wonderful. The baby thrived, growing plump and healthy. Penelope recovered from the birth and soon was back to her usual energy, though now her days revolved around their son's needs. Wade helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with Matthew when he fussed at night, and singing terrible off-key lullabies that somehow always seemed to soothe the baby. "You are a wonderful father," Penelope told him one evening as they sat together by the fire, Matthew asleep in Wade's arms. "I knew you would be, but seeing it in action makes me fall in love with you all over again." "I never knew I could feel this way," Wade admitted, looking down at his sleeping son. "So much love it almost scares me. I would do anything for him, for both of you." "I know," Penelope said, leaning against his shoulder, "and that is why we are so lucky to have you." The years that followed were full and happy. Matthew grew from a baby into a toddler, then a young boy full of energy and curiosity. He loved the ranch, loved being outside with the animals, loved following his father around and trying to help with the chores. Wade taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, setting him on the gentlest horse and guiding him around the corral. When Matthew was 3, Penelope became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier since she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah Rose, was born on a beautiful spring morning. She had Penelope's blonde hair and Wade's blue eyes, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father completely wrapped around her tiny finger. 2 years after Sarah came another son, James. And 3 years after James came their youngest, a daughter they named Emma after Wade's sister. Each child was welcomed with joy and love, each one adding to the fullness of their lives. The ranch prospered too. Wade expanded his herd and built additional outbuildings. He hired more ranch hands as the operation grew, and soon the Olson ranch was one of the most successful in the area. But success never changed Wade or Penelope. They remained humble and hardworking, teaching their children the value of honest labor and treating everyone with respect. Thomas visited from Ohio several times over the years, always bringing gifts for the children and news from home. He had married a woman named Clara and had children of his own, and the cousins delighted in playing together during his visits. Penelope's parents also came west multiple times, and Wade's sister, Emma, even made the trip from California once with her family. "Look at what you have built," Emma told Wade during her visit, gesturing to the bustling ranch, the happy children, the obvious love between Wade and Penelope. "I am so proud of you, big brother. Mother and father would be proud too." "I had help," Wade said, his arm around Penelope's waist as they watched their children play in the yard. "I could not have done any of this without Penelope. She is my partner in everything." "You are lucky to have found each other," Emma said. "Not everyone gets that kind of love." Wade pulled Penelope closer and pressed a kiss to her temple. "I know. Believe me, I know. Not a day goes by that I do not thank God for the day she stumbled onto my land." "The day you saved my life," Penelope corrected, smiling up at him, "and then kept saving it every day since." "We saved each other," Wade said softly. "I was just existing before you came. You gave me a reason to truly live." As the years rolled on, the children grew and the ranch continued to prosper. Matthew showed a natural talent for working with cattle and horses, and by the time he was 15, he was as good a ranch hand as any of Wade's employees. Sarah inherited her mother's love of learning and books, and Penelope taught her to read and write and do mathematics. James was the adventurous one, always getting into some scrape or another, but with such charm that it was hard to stay mad at him. Little Emma, the baby of the family, had her father's determination and her mother's kindness. Wade and Penelope watched their children grow with pride and joy, marveling at the family they had created. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed, they would sit together on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie, still as in love as they had been on their wedding day. More so, even, because now their love was deepened by shared history and overcome challenges and the family they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked one such evening when they had been married for nearly 20 years. "Staying here, giving up your life in Ohio?" Penelope looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Do you know what my life would have been if I had gone back to Ohio? I would have married some shopkeeper or clerk, someone safe and boring that my parents approved of. I would have lived my whole life in the same small house, doing the same small things, never knowing what I was capable of. But here with you I have lived, truly lived. I have known adventure and hardship and triumph. I have known real love. I have raised children in wide open spaces where they can run and grow and become whoever they want to be. How could I ever regret that? I just want to make sure you are happy," Wade said, taking her hand in his. "That has always been my goal, your happiness." "Then your goal has been achieved beyond measure," Penelope said, squeezing his hand. "I am happier than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted. You, this ranch, our children, this life. You became the answer to prayers I did not know I was praying. And I fall more in love with you every single day." Wade pulled her close and kissed her, deep and loving and full of 2 decades of devotion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I love you, Penelope Olson," Wade said. "Forever and always." "And I love you, Wade Olson," Penelope replied. "Forever and always." As they sat together in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the land they had made their own and the family they had created, Wade reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. It had started with a desperate woman collapsing on his land, searching for her lost brother. It had continued through recovery and growing trust, and a love that neither of them had expected. And it had blossomed into this, a life of purpose and meaning, full of love and laughter and the sweet satisfaction of building something lasting. Penelope had wandered into his life looking for answers about her brother, and in the process, Wade had become the answer to prayers neither of them had known they were praying. She had needed saving, and he had needed someone to save. She had needed a home, and he had needed someone to make his house into one. They had needed each other, 2 lonely souls finding completion in an unexpected meeting on the Kansas prairie. And now, 20 years and 4 children later, their story had grown into something beautiful and enduring. A ranch that prospered, children who thrived, a love that only grew stronger with time. It was not the life Wade had imagined for himself when he first came west, and it certainly was not what Penelope had expected when she boarded that stagecoach in Cincinnati. But it was perfect nonetheless. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Wade and Penelope remained on the porch, hands clasped, hearts full. Inside, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch settled into evening quiet. And stretching out in all directions, the Kansas prairie rolled endlessly onward, wild and free and beautiful. This was their legacy. Not just the land and the cattle and the buildings, but the love they had nurtured and the family they had raised. It was a legacy that would continue through their children and their children's children, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. And it had all started with one woman's desperate search for her brother and one rancher's simple act of kindness. Sometimes, Wade thought, the best stories are the ones you never see coming. The ones that start with a stranger collapsing at your feet and end with a lifetime of love. The ones where two people from completely different worlds find each other against all odds and build something neither could have built alone. This was their story. This was their happily ever after. And as Wade sat with his wife under the vast Kansas sky, he knew with absolute certainty that he would not change a single moment of it. Every challenge, every hardship, every unexpected turn had led them here, to this perfect evening, this perfect life, this perfect love. And that, in the end, was worth more than all the gold in California or all the cattle in Kansas. It was worth everything.